It's time to talk Gonzaga basketball.
Get ready.
It's the Spokesman-Review Zags Insiders Podcast.
Here we go.
Here's Jim Meehan and Richard Fox.
Good Monday morning. Welcome back to the Zags Basketball Insiders Podcast. Jim Meehan, Richard Fox with you for the next half hour or so. Recap what's happened to Gonzaga a week ago, this last week, and then what's coming this coming week is another big one for the Zags. But Richard, let's start out with kind of where the Zags sit nationally. The poll has not come out, the AP poll. The Zags had 50 points there last week. Don't anticipate they'll crack the top 25 quite yet. I would think if they did some damage this week and next week that they would, but they've got a lot of work to do that way. In the net, Gonzaga is 23rd. I believe St. Mary's is 15th. The big number there is San Francisco at 60, which would qualify as a quad one game when the Zags go to the Chase Center the following week. Big game on a lot of fronts, but that would be a quad one as well as probably the game that decides the second seed in the WCC for the tournament. And that's obviously comes with a bye into the semifinals. So that's a big deal. The brackets, Gonzaga keeps making up a little ground each week as it has these unbeaten weeks. They are now in on a couple of the brackets. I believe Joe Lunardi has them as an 11 seed playing Mississippi in a play-in game. That's the latest I saw from him. That might have been a few days old. I don't think he updates it till Monday afternoon. Jerry Palm still has them out in the first four. And I believe Mike DeCourcy from Fox Sports had them in last Saturday. So I certainly doubt they'll drop from being, I think he had them as a 10 seed. And so they're kind of gaining ground, but I guess the best way to put it is if they keep that loss record, that loss column at 6 in the next 2 weeks, I would think they are in great shape at that point to get an at-large. Gets a little dicey if there's a loss to San Francisco or St. Mary's on the closing weekend, but just a matter of you got to take care of your business, right, Foxy?
Yeah, look, I think everything that they want to do is still out there in front of them, and you get both those wins. I don't think you're stressed nearly in the same way that you would be today if the tournament in Vegas started this week. So, I mean, it's I think good to remember that they're that mid-20s or so in the net. I don't believe a team has ever been that high in the net and not been selected. So, to your point, if they keep taking care of their business, and quite frankly, if they can get 1 or 2 in San Francisco, we might still be feeling okay about them, but depending on where the net's at. So, yeah, they just got to keep playing, and it's amazing how one game can let you breathe a little bit easier. That Kentucky win is no small thing, especially after Kentucky has a great win over the weekend against Auburn.
Yeah, Kentucky, by the way, 22 in the net. They're one spot ahead of the Zags. Let's go through last week. A couple of games that kind of took on the same tone, at least from where I was sitting. They played at Loyola Marymount, a team down to 6 scholarships. Players on the roster. Dom Harris did not play. He's got a injury that probably going to keep him out for another week, maybe 2 even. But much like the Pacific game on Saturday at home, the Zags were rolling offensively. Not many dead spots, not many empty possessions, scored it inside, scored it outside. Graham Ike did his thing. All of them did their thing. I think at Loyola, the 5 starters might have had all but 2 points in that game, if I remember right, which is incredible. I think they scored 91, so that's 89 out of 5 guys. It seemed to me that LMU and Pacific, especially Pacific, just didn't have the bigs to deal with those Gonzaga bigs, and nobody right now has anybody to deal with what Ryan Nembhard's doing out there. He's a conductor. He's moving the chess pieces all over, and it's checkmate nearly every night out for him. What'd you make of the offense those 2 games?
Yeah, look, I said that I had to call on Saturday. I said this on air. It's if your point guard doesn't get sped up, your team generally doesn't get sped up either. And it with Ryan, he clearly, had a lot of ability coming in here after a couple of years at Creighton. But it's interesting. It almost feels like he's a kid the game is slowed down even more. Just doesn't get rushed. Really takes care of the ball. It feels like half the turnovers he has, or guys can't handle it, or they're not looking for it, or just not in the right spot. So that's a real luxury for this group. And then, I mean, look, if you're a Gonzaga fan, I presume that you have some PTSD about guys coming in and setting all-time high marks with scoring. Feels like Gonzaga's good for that at least a handful of times a year. And that's what happened with Will Johnson. I thought LMU hit some really difficult shots, particularly in the first half. I think we can talk a little bit about the overall defensive effort over the weekend. Maybe not quite what we would have expected, but he hit some tough shots. There was a really inspired group. I thought a great response from them at home after getting absolutely shellacked up here. But you're absolutely right. I mean, that is the difference for Gonzaga. It's quite frankly, it's been the difference for probably about a decade now, if not longer, is Gonzaga's superior talent and depth up front. There have been great post players come to the league outside of Gonzaga, certainly, but Gonzaga's just had this ability to have kind of a collection of them at any given time. It's, you can just go down, go back in time and think about just the talent level that they've had. I mean, you've had guys like Petrusev have to come off the bench, Drew Timme come off the bench, Killian Tilly. I mean, it's just a long list of Sabonis, which is indicative of just the dominance that Gonzaga has. And this year's no different. I mean, Graham Ike is a real problem for this league if he stays out of foul trouble. Braden's not consistent, but when he gets going, I mean, that's almost a backbreaker, I think, for teams. And obviously Ben and Anton have been, really good throughout the year, but certainly here in league play. So, I'd say the same thing about Pacific, as I say about LMU. I was really impressed with their approach, and they gave Gonzaga as much as they could, but just they don't have enough firepower.
Yeah, those two teams I thought had the right game plan, if you will, did what they could, played their tails off, both of them. I mean, Pacific really, they spilled some sweat on that court. They, Leonard Perry, Stan Johnson, both good coaches and kind of know the deal. They are not giving up on their team. Their team is not giving up on them, more importantly. And so those were impressive efforts. You have to give them credit. The not so good of it from my end too was defensively. There was some breakdowns in both games. And I think similar breakdowns, and something that kind of stuck out from last year's team to me, that dribble penetration, the straight line drive, the drive and dish. Against LMU, I thought it was more cutters dinging them too in that game. Maybe against Pacific, it was literally just they got to the rim, and they got these smaller wing type, lots of guards and wings. Even their bigs are wings, and they're just putting their head down and going to the rim, and the Zags had some trouble dealing with that. That might have something to do with playing the three bigs at times. That's kind of a give and take at both ends. What did you see defensively from the Zags in those two games?
Well, look, Pacific is interesting because with Dennison and Blake, they can go, and Williams, they can go small and they just spread you out. And they did that down there in Stockton against the Zags and had some success. And you saw that up here too. I thought Gonzaga made a mistake. They had Greg matched up with Martindale and Anton on Williams there in the second half for a stretch. I think the thinking being Martindale more of a shooter, not necessarily a guy who puts it on the bounce. I'm sorry, the inverse. They had Greg on Williams and Anton on Martindale, and they eventually switched that. And Ben had a real trouble keeping Williams in front, and they just kept breaking down the defense. Odom's quickness, Ben really had his knee bandaged up in the Pacific game, and I haven't noticed it before. Maybe that's been a thing for a while, but he just didn't look quite as explosive. So, I thought some matchup problems, and then just a lot of straight line drives. Odom gave him fits, and then more importantly, look, you're going to give up straight line drives. Guys are too good at this level, and you're not going to keep a guy in front every time he puts it on the floor. What I thought was a little bit curious, or it was just startling, was how poor the weak side rotations were.
Exactly.
Whether it be an offensive rebound or more frequently a dump down to a guy who's just basically alone at the rim, but those are all things they can correct. I think Pacific, because of their ability to stretch you out, even though they don't shoot the ball well, you're guarding perimeter players, so your instinct, particularly if you're Watson or Greg or Huff and Ike, is I'm taking an extra step or two out towards the 3-point line versus if I'm guarding a complete non-shooter or a big who's closer to the basket, I'm already kind of in that position. So, but it's the first time that Pacific game was the first time I looked at that 3 big lineup and thought that it wasn't holding up defensively. At least that's the first time I thought that in a long time. They've been really good, the 3 of them.
Yeah.
I mean, at LMU, I think much of the same. I think you're right. It felt more like ball movement was the problem, or rather player movement versus straight line drives. I mean, look, they hit some really tough contested shots, but they did a good job moving without the ball, and I thought got some easier looks that way. So look, I mean, Gonzaga's got time to shore those things up. That's a lot of that is scheme and effort and just being focused. But yeah, I would agree with you. It stood out to me from the weekend. It was not the best defensive effort I've seen them have. Well, another way to say it, it's the worst defensive effort I've seen them have in a long time.
Well, and it just gave me those flashbacks to last year. That was a recurring issue last year with them, and they're going to see it again. Portland does that to some degree.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of teams in this league do it because they don't have the 2 or 3 bigs that they can rely on. Now the trade-off, as we talked about, is Gonzaga pretty much scored it at will for almost 80 minutes in these games. I mean, 91 and 102, I believe, is what they finished with. I went through the box score when I got home after the LMU or the Pacific game. 80.5% on 2-pointers. 40% on threes. They were 90.9 at the foul line. I think they were 20 of 22. Watson, Huff, Ike, 22 of 25, 88%. I mean, just absurd numbers on that side. But maybe just a quick thought from you, Foxy, on Nembhard. He has really settled in. The comfort level is there. How has that changed just the efficiency the Zags have displayed here since the St. Mary's loss?
He's our most important player, Jim. Yeah. He's the guy for just to pick a really generic and overplayed analogy, he's the straw that stirs the drink. Yeah. If you don't have Nembhard, I don't think we're talking anything about where they're at in the net right now or the tournament. I think they're double-digit loss. He's that important to what they're doing. He's not their best player in that he's not a dominant scorer. He's not their best defender or anything like that. But without him, he's the only guy who can do what he does, and you see that. And when you can't speed up my point guard, you're going to have a tough time speeding me up. I don't know what else to say other than the guy's just been unbelievable. In league play, he's 5th in field goal percentage. Who had that on their bingo card after the non-conference? He doesn't qualify based on I think 3-pointers made, but he's shooting 49% from the 3-point line. In league play, he takes about 3.5 a game, so that's a little bit of volume there. It's not as if he's taking 1.5. Obviously tops in assist to turnover ratio, number 2 in steals, all while playing the 3rd most minutes in conference play. So it's impressive. I mean, they assisted on almost 50% of their field goals over the weekend. 18 turnovers, but 14 steals, so basically 4 turnovers. That's how I like to look at it that way, where we may cough it up 10 times, but we stole it back 7, so you're kind of reclaiming those lost possessions. So he's been unbelievable. He's been everything that they would have wanted. And I think it's also a reminder for us and everybody that it's a long year. Yeah. And certainly he had some poor moments in the non-conference, but it's a long year, and it's really about how these guys are playing when we get to this time of year and into March. And he's certainly playing his best basketball. And I think the last thing I would say is what he does is transferable to anybody they play. If he plays with the control he has, and now he's changing speeds a lot more than he was to start the year. I feel like at the start of the year, he was just playing so fast all the time. And now he'll put it down to second gear, third gear. You can do that. The only concern you really have is, depending on matchups, if they play a team with big guards, long guards, but that's going to be there no matter what. But he's shooting the ball at a much better clip. I think that works against just about anybody in the country. It's a really good sign for GU.
Yeah, his stats, interestingly, in wins versus losses, points come down 3 or 4, and assists go up, I think he understands that and has adjusted his approach himself. He's not looking to score as much, I don't think, especially when they play better teams. He understands that getting everybody else involved is going to be bigger than putting up 15 or whatever. We got to move on. Portland's on tap Thursday. Defensively, the Pilots continue to struggle. I think they've dropped a bunch of games in a row here, maybe 4, I think, in a row they've lost. They try something with the Zags all the time where they, at least the last 3 meetings in Spokane, where they allow that three ball, the way they guard and what they pack the paint, trying to stop the inside. Zags hit them with 15 in Spokane, 3 balls. They hit them with 18 and 17 the 2 years before. I think those are the top 2 in the McCarthy since it's been built. Top 2 highest totals. Pepperdine hit them for 15 in a win over the Pilots last week. I'm expecting that's probably going to be the case. If the Zags show they can hit the 3, maybe they'll adjust, but at least, at the opening tip, that's probably what they're going to do. I don't know. But they're without Tyler Harris the last few games. He's the freshman that's had great numbers for him, gives him a little size. I think he's a 6'7" kid that rebounds it pretty good. The pieces aren't too bad offensively for Portland, even with the injury. Tyler Robertson, very good all-around player. It, to me, just comes down to how they're going to be able to defend Gonzaga, and I'm not sure there's an answer there if the Zags are hitting the outside shot.
Yeah, I mean, look, this is the second or third worst defensive team in the league from a field goal percentage perspective. They are the worst 3-point defensive team. Teams are shooting 41% from 3 on them. Yeah. Second worst rebounding team, -6 on the glass in league play. But they'll get it up from 3. They make the most in league play. I think about 9 in conference play. But yeah, look, it'll be interesting to see what kind of crowd that they get there at home. Certainly these teams are going to be better at home. LMU's evidence of that. Pacific did a good job up here, but certainly were a tougher test on their home floor. Pepperdine is to a certain degree there in that first half versus up here. So going down there that it's going to be a bit of a different experience than when you saw them up here. But on balance, I don't think any of us expect that to be a game Gonzaga stumbles in just because of what they can do inside. And with Ryan playing the way he's playing, we haven't brought up Hickman yet, but Nolan's obviously been consistent here in league. He's shooting it well. He's not turning it over at a high clip. His scoring seems to come in bunches. I think at times you wish there was a little bit more consistency over 40 minutes with his offense. But as we talked about, a week or 2 ago, the process of winning a game is 40 minutes. And sometimes as a player, your role or your stretch where you're going to really have an impact might just be 10 or 15 minutes. And he's been consistently doing that. He'll have a great run or great stretch. So I don't expect Portland to put up much of, I expect them to put up a much better fight, but I don't anticipate that they're going to find a way to win the game.
Yeah. Well, let's move on to Saturday night back home versus Santa Clara. Everybody remembers what happened down at the Levy Center. Adama Alpha Ball kind of took that game over at the end. Santa Clara scored the last 5 points and pulled out a win. That one really stings Gonzaga right now. I think if that one's on the other side of the win-loss column, they'd be in real good shape for the at-large. They'd be in contention for the league title. But right now, St. Mary's is 2 games out. Ball has been injured. apparently, and hasn't played in a few games, along with Brenton Napper, who also hurt the Zags down there, the guard. He has been out. I think Ball hasn't played since February 3rd, so something going on there. That's more than 2 weeks. I guess the key question is, if they're healthy, it's probably a different challenge for the Zags. Again, it's straight line drive. Carlos Marshall, Ball. They had a kid come off the bench, give him 23, Jalen Benjamin, I think is a transfer, a grad student, another guard who's pretty good on the rim runs or on the drives to the rim. I think that's what's going to happen if Santa Clara has their way. They're going to try to do what they did down in Santa Clara at the Levy, and I think the Zags are going to try to counter that with their strength inside. If the Broncos are missing some guys, that maybe changes the picture here. But what are you expecting to see on Saturday when the Broncos come to town?
They're well coached. I mean, look, I think that's a really good point you make about how what I would have thought, or I think we both thought after the loss, not a good loss, in that you didn't play very well and still had a chance to win and then kind of coughed it up. But my feeling was Santa Clara was going to be right there at the top of the league with a chance to maybe throw a wrench in this thing and finish top two. And they've certainly not had the year that I think we thought they were going to have, and I would expect that they thought they were going to have. So now it's sitting at 8-4 in the league. And certainly short-handed, but the Sendek's a really good coach. They guard you. One of the best defensive teams in the league, best three-point defensive team in the league. They've got some size, unlike most teams in the league. It's not necessarily top end in that those guys score a bunch, but they're big, physical, and they've got multiple bodies, and that gave Gonzaga certainly fits down there. I mean, one of the takeaways from that game was it just felt like Santa Clara was tougher for a big stretch of that game and more physical, really took it to Gonzaga. I think the last 10 minutes or so that the Gonzaga flipped that a little bit. I think when you've got a guy like Sendek and they've got a real culture there, they have real depth. Certainly not having Ball hurts them. He's their leading scorer. But I wouldn't be surprised if that game felt tight and close for a while. Certainly much closer than any of the other home games they've had other than St. Mary's. Santa Clara's got a lot of pride. So Gonzaga should win that game. But again, I think that'll be more competitive than some might think.
Yeah, I think Santa Clara's got 4 losses in league, so they're kind of
8-4. Yep,
they're kind of slotted behind the top 3 of Gonzaga, St. Mary's, and USF. But there are good individual pieces there. Again, several of these teams have these guys that can go get their own buckets. Even Pepperdine has that. San Diego has a couple of guys that can do that. And that's the challenge for Gonzaga's defense. I think at this point you don't worry as much about their offense. But one other thing Santa Clara has that it can be a little bit troublesome is they've got a bigger kid that can shoot it outside, Johnny O'Neill, I think.
Yeah.
Transfer from American University, maybe back east.
Sounds
he's
right.
kind of stepped up and done some things, and that'll be one of those guys. If they can keep him under wraps, maybe the other guys don't become as important or as effective. You can help more. You can your rotation's better if there's a drive. So we'll see what the Zags do. But really, the story of Saturday night, provided the Zags keep winning, is it's Anton Watson's senior night, and that's a 5th-year guy. Kind of you talk about certain guys in this program, Kevin Pangos, Pendergraft, Elias Harris, Drew Timme, Stephen Gray, Matt Bolden, these guys who played their whole career here. And Drew's a rare guy with 5th year. That's Shemek Karnowski. They're just kind of ultimate Zags, if you know what I mean. Guys who kind of embody what the program is about. This kid has done that, and he's a local kid to boot. A Swiss Army knife of a player. He'll beat you with a bucket. He'll beat you with a steal. He'll block a shot. He'll run the break. He'll take away your best offensive option. Not many guys have come through that are like Anton Watson, that versatility. Be an emotional scene for him. He'll have his family around, and lots of friends and family because he's from here. I hope he handles that. That can be a little dicey on senior night. I'm sure he will. He's got a lot of poise, and but man, I think the Zags are going to miss that kid. He has been great on the team, in the community, about all you can ask for.
Look, let's set Anton aside for just a moment and just think about how uncommon it is in today's A, college basketball today, and B, Gonzaga's program to have a guy here 4 or 5 years. Now you can go back to the beginning and think of countless guys who were Zags who were here for 4 years or a total of 5 with redshirt years, but just given the nature of college basketball with guys transferring, the nature of this program now with guys going early to the league. It's pretty uncommon. And then you bring Anton back, his story, layer on top of that, the local kid. I think it could not be more appropriate that it's his night versus sharing it with 3 or 4 other seniors. He certainly would not have had a problem with that, but that's pretty storybook in my mind is, here's this local kid who, it's not been smooth sailing for him through his career. As everyone probably remembers, he came out of the gates pretty dynamic. He was pretty dynamic to start his freshman year and then hurts his shoulder. And then you think about the guys that Gonzaga was recruiting. He had to take, a back seat in a way that maybe he hadn't anticipated. I think he thought maybe he'd be one of the guys from the beginning or pretty early on in his career. But, I just really commend him for sticking with it. I think it's easy in today's day and age. And I'm not saying it's right or wrong. It's just easy to kind of look for the next thing and see if that might be a better fit or you might be a better situation. He stuck it through, and he's not a guy. You're not going to remember him because he's one of the best players to ever come through here. But I think you're going to remember him because of his story, but also because I know it's intangible, Jim. I don't know how you quantify, but if I'm thinking of guys who, winners, players who helped you win, not just games, but kept it all going, kind of the glue to this whole thing. Anton's near the top of that list, if not the top. Just what he does. I mean, more steals and turnovers in his career, 1,300 plus scorer. He's going to end up over 850 rebounds. I mean, and again, this is with the guy who spent not in immaterial portions of his career either not playing or having to take a back seat. So pretty awesome. I would hope that the crowd will really lift him up and let him know how much he's appreciated, because I just don't know if you see that again. Spokane kid coming up and playing at this program and having that kind of career. I mean, I'm sure it'll happen at some point, but that doesn't happen all that often.
That's a unique kid, and obviously what he's done for the program. I mentioned all those names. Those are guys that I've covered just in the last 15 years. Josh Perkins will be on there, another 5th-year guy. I mean, he got
that's a great call.
Calvary, Santangelo, all those guys from your teams.
Well, and Tilly's a guy who I think, I mean, so they're there, but I don't know, there's something different about Anton and what he's done while he's been there, and just really impressive. And it's funny, Timmy leaves and maybe EK captures 85% of that, maybe more. I don't know, he's a better defender and all. We could have that conversation. They're not replacing what Anton does next year. And that's that's the ultimate, I think, testament to a guy is we're not going to be able to replace him with one guy or get even a big percentage of that. He's just so good now on both ends.
Yeah, he's just been a terrific player. He's fun to watch, just how different he is than so many players because of what he does at both ends. He's a great passer. People kind of forget that his assist numbers are through the roof too for a big, just like his steal numbers. But
think about what he's doing in league though too. In the conference, he ranks number 2 on the year from the 3-point line on a percentage basis, and he takes over 3 a game.
And
I'm sorry, one and a half a game. 1.5 a game. Yeah,
we might have talked about this last year. I think he's elevated his potential to be an NBA guy. I thought last year he could be an NBA guy. Maybe it's the lower end of the roster or whatever, but if he could, and I think I said this to you, is if he could hit the 3-ball consistently, which he has done this year, and he's making free throws now here the last few weeks too. That's going down. I think with his other things that he can do at both ends, his rebounding, his defending multiple spots, handles the ball. I could see him. I think he's going to, at the very least, get a shot at the combine or summer league. I think those are all givens. And I think when people see what he brings to a team and a locker room and the variety of impact, I think he's going to get a pretty good shot at the next level, which would be cool to see a guy that doesn't have to score 20 a game or 25 a game show how you can impact a game elsewhere. And I hope he gets that shot. I'm sure he will. I kind of hope he has a great night on Saturday. I think
me too. Me too.
A worthy finish for him. So, hey, I think that's going to do it for us this week. I think we stayed closer to 30 minutes, Foxy. That's a record for us.
I was going to say the closest maybe ever.
It's the best 30 minutes we'll spend this week. So, hey, appreciate everybody joining in every Monday. Our thanks to Christy Burns. She is a lifesaver for all the things we can't do technically, technology-wise. We'll post this in an hour or two, and hope you give it a listen. We're coming back next Monday. So once again, thanks from the Zags Basketball Insiders Podcast.